working, I'm incredibly inspired just to see everybody, like Don said, show up and be here and commit your time and your interest and your willingness to actually change and be a difference in the world. And that's incredibly inspiring, and I so hope that each and every one of us are inspired to do things at least a little differently in the future. And while I hope that everyone is inspired, I'm also going to guess that there's at least a couple of us in the room who are feeling a little overwhelmed after today. Because it's been a lot. There's been a lot of incredible information that's been going around, and there's a lot of great ideas in this room, and there's so many different organizations to become a part of and to think about all of the different ways that we can both individually and collectively make changes. And that's all incredibly exciting, and it's also a little overwhelming. I mean, just thinking about, I've been in sessions just taking notes, and heat pumps and geothermals and green power purchasing programs and solar panels and buying electric vehicles and changing electric panels and going plant-based and then carrying your reusable water bottle and reusing glass jars and limiting all of your plastic usage and then installing a smart meter and then switching out your light bulbs and then composting your food and your yard waste and zero waste events and then also like no mow May and like pollinated gardens, and that list just goes on. It's a lot, and none of us can do it all, and that's okay. The thing is with climate, the challenge is huge. We know it's big. We know this is a huge problem, and we need a whole lot more than the 200 or so people that showed up to this event, but 200 people showed up to this event, right? And so, while the challenge is huge, it also means that this is good opportunities because there's so many opportunities that are available. So we can think of these things not as an insurmountable list of all of the things that you're not doing, but all of the opportunities that there are out there to reduce environmental impacts. So, as a professor of sustainability, my work, I'm the egghead that comes up with all the calculations. I'm the one who's like, you can do this, and so 30% of your carbon emissions by doing this. And then if you do this, then this is better than this. Or use the paper bag instead of the plastic bag. Those are all the studies that I do. Those are the kinds of things that I work on. We jot those numbers, we do the carbon inventories of things. And I gotta say, there's times that I don't know what the right thing is to do. I'll be standing in a grocery aisle and I'll be looking at two different products and be like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I should get some undergrads to do a study on this. Not entirely sure what the best option is moving forward, because it's not always obvious, and the amount of effort that we put into something is not necessarily the exact equivalent of the impact that it can have. So there are things that we can do that actually don't require a tremendous amount of effort or time or money, that can still have an overall good impact on our personal or household or community carbon budgets. And there are things that require a huge amount of effort that sometimes only result in marginal improvements. So like one of the examples is, so if you think about plastic use and reduction, and plastic use and reduction is something we should all do. Let's all do that. And as far as the overall effectiveness of interventions, if you give up all plastic bottle usage for 2 years, figure out ways of never having another plastic water bottle in your life again, that's the equivalent to one single round trip to Detroit, from Ann Arbor to Detroit. If you carpooled with someone to Detroit for a show that you're going to see, that is the equivalent of trying to figure out workarounds for plastic bottles for 2 years, sorry. There are plenty of things that require a tremendous amount of effort that, yes, do have an improvement, do make a difference, but aren't necessarily always the things that we need to prioritize top on our list. And again, that's not saying anything about reduce plastic waste, yes. But maybe don't worry about every single plastic bottle. Maybe don't worry about every single thing that you are not doing. Because yes, the bigger climate improvements often, unfortunately, do require major investments of time or money or both. But you don't need to invest tens of thousands of dollars to reduce your environmental footprint. There's plenty of things that you can do this month, this week, today, that actually will have some impact. And of course, if individual impacts matter, but collective impacts matter even more. And so it's this interesting thing that I often hear about when people are talking about carbon reductions and environmental improvements, and this whole struggle of, yeah, but we're just one person, we're just one household, this needs to be institutional change. And yes, institutional change is necessary, absolutely, and we're pushing for that. We're seeing that at the state level, we're seeing this at the community level, and Arbor is doing amazing things. And we also need individual participation. It's the same argument that people make of, my vote doesn't make a difference. Well, it's true, most elections aren't decided by one vote. But they are decided by everyone collectively coming out and showing up and casting their individual efforts toward a greater collective. So it's about progress, not perfection. And it's about everyday decisions. And again, I really am going to highlight that it's not about focusing on what you can't do, or can't do right now, or honestly just don't want to do. If you don't want to do it, chances are you're not going to do it. Right? So think about the things that you can do. Think about the things that you want to do. Think about the changes that you want to see. And those are going to be the things that are going to be effective, because chances are there's going to be someone else who can do the other things that maybe you're not in the position to do right now, or just isn't in your overall lifestyle. So figuring out what you can do. So in terms of what I always tell people, in terms of there's sort of three big things to always focus on, in terms of prioritization of how we can actually reduce impact. The first and most important and easiest to remember is that you can always guarantee there's going to be less environmental impact when there's less consumption. Hands down. Use less water, there's less impact. Use less electricity, there's less impact. Drive a little less impact. Guaranteed across the board, if you can find ways to reduce consumption, you're going to reduce environmental impact. Now, we're humans though, and consumption is part of life. It's like thermodynamically impossible not to consume. It really, really is, right? We need water, we need food, we need energy, we need stuff, right? And we needed to have thriving societies. And so where we are consuming, we need to start making better, more sustainable choices. And yes, it's not always easy to know exactly what those are, but there are plenty of organizations around this room that can help you think through your individual choices and what those can look like. So consume less. When we do consume, try to make better choices. And then the third thing is talk about it. So make actions visible, and I heard this in a number of sections of really saying, just highlighting the things that we're doing, pointing out why you're, maybe looking at that meatless option in the restaurant, or whatever it happens to be, right? Thinking about putting in a programmable thermostat if you don't already have one. Thinking about bigger ticket items like actually investing in solar or geothermal or other sort of major household renovations like heat pumps, right? So make those visible, talk about them, and that way more people know that that's options out there. And so again, things can be confusing, but there's three major categories of impact where you can make the most difference. You don't have to be rock stars in each and every one of these categories. You can pick and choose what makes sense for you and where you actually have effectiveness for what you can push on. So the major categories are transportation, household energy and the stuff in your household, and food. Those are the three big ones, right? And again, we can talk about, where those fit in, but thinking through what are sort of the big ticket items in each of those tend to be things that you only think about maybe once every 10 years or once every 5 years, or, those are the things that are sort of, cornerstone decisions. But each bin of those have smaller choices embedded in them. So yes, if you're thinking about transportation, one of the things is what kind of vehicle you drive, or if you drive a vehicle at all. If you have or are able to be in a place where you have access to transit and use it. And then, of course, thinking through vehicle selection, whether or not you are in a position to be able to get an electric vehicle. Yes, we want to see a lot more electric vehicles on the market. Not everybody's going to be in that position to do so, and that's okay. Thinking through, hey, could I just drive less? Could I make a commitment to, rather than, a standard 13,000 or 14,000 miles that an average American drives, or whatever your transportation footprint is, could I make a commitment to cut that down by 10% or 5%? Is that possible to reduce that piece of the environmental footprint of transportation? Then of course there's household, and I know we've talked a lot about household energy use. So of course there's those big ticket items, the renovation kinds of items, and of course that goes to facilities as well as individual households. Those are going to be big ticket kinds of investment decisions, and if you are able to do those, those are phenomenal, and those are not the only options to make differences. Smart meters, thinking about energy efficiency improvements, just plugging up leaks in your household can have a major difference. Thinking about, changing the thermostat to a little bit more or less than someone in your household might like, and having that discussion with your household, that could be it. Whatever it happens to be in that sort of way. And then of course there's the food bit. And the food one is one that I highlight a lot. It's one that I talk about a lot, in large part because there's not those big infrastructure decisions you have to make on food. Food is something we consume every single day, and it's one of the major contributors to environmental impact across the world and climate. And so thinking through environmental food choices, both in terms of increasing amount of plant-based food, decreasing environmentally intensive food, particularly with respect to red meat and so meats and dairy in general. But again, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition. You don't have to go entirely plant-based to reduce the amount of carbon in your diet. Even if you don't even go plant-based at all, thinking through food waste. Food waste, we use an incredible amount of food waste, right? So particularly thinking through those environmentally intensive items. We talk about respecting protein, right? So really thinking through how to, if you are consuming meat items, how to make sure that we're not wasting any of that which we do actually consume. And really reducing our impact by reducing food waste and thinking through our energy choices. So again, there's lots of new options to try out there. There's lots of different leverage points to go. I will say this, that when we're talking to others, when we're talking to ourselves, when we're thinking about our individual choices, we often in the environmental movement talk about reduce, giving things up, reduction. And it's many times a good way and a good time to start giving up the guilt, right? And so rather than, it turns out psychologists have shown that whenever we're trying to build new habits, giving things up is a very, very bad way of actually making progress. We're really bad as a species of sacrificing things. What we are much better about is thinking about what we add to our lives by giving things up. And so as you're having conversations, as you're thinking through your choices, thinking through what you are adding by giving up is a really great shift in communicating environment to others, particularly those who you're trying to get on board. So thinking about things like adding community, adding walking and bikeability to actually improve our neighborhoods and our livelihoods and our safety. Thinking about added comfort by reducing those rattling windows. Thinking about, well, rather than giving up meat this week or this Monday, how about trying a new recipe that's new and exciting? And we're adding that to our diet rather than trying to take something away. How about increasing quality time with your people rather than getting in a car to run errands and going out to buy things, right? How do you think about adding things in a way of reducing? And so with that, I'll just encourage us all to take some minutes today and over the next couple days and as conversations continue, to think about these leverage points that we all have. We all have decisions that we are in control of, and we also are indirectly influential to other people's decisions. And so thinking through where all those decision points happen. So are they things that you are able to decide on and can make a difference? Or, and each one of us have those in terms of our own personal behavior, in terms of what we're ordering off of menus, in terms of what our own personal comfort is and our changing thermostats accordingly, but also in terms of our workplaces, our places we volunteer, our places of worship, just when we're having family over and we're planning a menu or a meal. What does that actually mean? Where are the different decision points that we can actually potentially nudge people in different directions? And so thinking through those individual points, yes, those big picture items of saying, hey, if we're undergoing a massive renovation, maybe we really need to think much more strongly about climate smart infrastructure, but also into the smaller individual day-to-day decisions of maybe let's just hang out rather than drive, or whatever it happens to be. And so I'll end today by just encouraging you in terms of the climate challenge and in terms of the spirit of the day, thinking through what your leverage points are and what you can commit to. Yes, of course, the big changes, yes, that's what we're all trying to aspire to, and trying to figure out where we can implement those. And also, what are some of the small changes, the things that we want to do, the things that we can do, the things that we're able to do. Not just focusing on what we can't do or what seems very tough to do, but what we can do and we can do together today. So thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to continuing this journey with you. We'll turn it over to Tim.